Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We are mapping out the precise historical steps, the strategic treaties, and the absolute driving forces behind European imperialism across Asia and Africa. If you're a focused learner, and especially if you're gearing up for those HSC exams and need to master these exact details, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to meticulously break down the dates, the key figures, and the specific territories that literally built the architecture of the British Empire, along with the broader European scramble for global dominance. It's like a giant puzzle, and today we're putting the pieces together. So let's dive right in.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, securing India's borders. 2, the annexation of Myanmar. 3, the Berlin Conference. And 4, carving up Africa. Okay, before we start looking at maps, we need to quickly pin down a crucial concept that is going to come up repeatedly in our sources today, the protectorate, or the vassal state. When you see these terms, it basically means a weaker state is heavily influenced or even entirely controlled by a stronger nation. The weaker state might actually keep some of its own internal leadership, but the catch? It completely surrenders its independent foreign policy and its external defense. Keep this definition in your back pocket because it perfectly describes the exact nature of British control over several territories we're about to look at.
All right, Section 1, securing India's borders, the Himalayan buffer.
Imagine you're the British Empire, right? You hold India. It's your prized possession. Your absolute biggest nightmare is a threat coming from the north or the east. So how exactly did they secure this massive Himalayan buffer? Let's break it down chronologically, because these were not random land grabs, they were highly calculated. First up, Nepal. Following a war that ended with the Treaty of Sagali in 1815, the British gained control of the Kumaon and Garhwal regions, and they even planted a British resident right in Kathmandu. Next, Sikkim. After capturing Darjeeling, the British established an 1890 treaty that made Sikkim a formal British protectorate, effectively taking over its internal administration and foreign policies. Then we have Bhutan. Through treaty in 1910, the King of Bhutan agreed to let the British advise on all its external affairs and defense. And finally, Tibet. To counter Russian influence, the 1907 Anglo-Russian Treaty was signed, which principally acknowledged China's suzerainty over Tibet. Like I said, a very deliberate, step-by-step process to build an impenetrable wall around India.
Moving right along to Section 2, the annexation of Myanmar, eastward expansion. Okay, so the northern mountains are locked down tight. Where do the British look next? Eastward, to Myanmar, or Burma as it was known back then. They really wanted to protect their Indian frontiers from the French, who were busy operating over in Indochina. Plus, they were incredibly eager to exploit Myanmar's rich natural wealth. But they didn't just conquer it overnight. It was a very methodical, three-step process. The first Anglo-Burmese war happened under Lord Amherst, triggered when the Burmese conquered Manipur and attacked Assam. The British Navy stepped in and conquered Yangon, called Rangoon at the time. Then came the Second War under Lord Dalhousie, originally sparked by, get this, a minor incident involving a fine on British individuals, but it firmly established British influence. Finally, the Third Anglo-Burmese War hits in 1885. The British were getting really alarmed because the King of Myanmar was making contact with the French, Italians, and Germans. Using a dispute over a fine levied on the Bombay-Burma Trading Corporation as a handy pretext, the British attacked and captured the city of Mandalay. And just like that, the entire region became an integral part of the British Empire.
Now, here is a fascinating historical micro-narrative for you. What exactly do you do with a conquered king once you've taken his country? To ensure he couldn't stick around and organize a rebellion, the British imprisoned King Thibaw of Myanmar and exiled him entirely out of his country. They relocated him all the way to Ratnagiri in Maharashtra, India. They kept King Thibaw under strict house arrest, sure, but they built him this ridiculously luxurious 3-story palace to live in. Our source material describes a large hall with a marble floor, beautifully carved wooden panels, and hemispherical windows with panes of colorful Italian glass. This is such a brilliant illustration of a specific British imperial strategy. They gave deposed royalty this comfortable, isolated captivity to just completely neutralize them politically. And here is the kicker. The source notes that the British used the exact same policy for Emperor Bahadur Shah II after the 1857 War of Independence in India. They exiled him to Yangon in Myanmar, where he eventually died. So they literally swapped their royal prisoners across the Bay of Bengal. Unbelievable, right?
Let's zoom out now to Section 3, the Berlin Conference, a global scale.
While Britain was busy consolidating all this power in Asia, a massive, unprecedented scramble was brewing back in Europe for territory on a completely different continent, Africa. In 1884, European geographers and researchers gathered in Berlin.
But the true purpose of this conference was highly premeditated. They were there to discuss the possibilities of dividing African territory amongst themselves. Now, King Leopold II of Belgium had already established his dominion over the Congo, and at this conference, his sovereignty was officially acknowledged by the other European nations. So essentially, you have a group of European powers sitting around a map deciding exactly how to carve up an entire continent without going to war with each other.
Which brings us to Section 4, Carving Up Africa. The Scrambles Manifests. Let's look at the specific, on-the-ground territorial acquisitions that came out of this grand agreement. It's a rapid-fire land grab. Germany grabbed Togoland, Cameroon, and Southwest Africa, while also taking the coastal region in the east. France claimed Madagascar, and they also established vast supremacy in West Africa, claiming Senegal, Gambia, the Ivory Coast, and Dahomey, basically controlling the region from the Sahara Desert all the way down to the west coast. Meanwhile, Britain acquired Nigeria, the Cape Colony, and Natal in the south. Oh, and they also declared Zanzibar, Pemba Island, and Nyasaland, which we now know as modern-day Malawi, as British protectorates. It was a staggering reshaping of the map. The British strategy in North Africa offers a really fantastic contrast in how these imperial methods actually worked in practice. In Egypt, control was gained purely through financial maneuvering. To fund the Suez Canal, Egypt had taken out massive loans. When they reached a point where they couldn't even pay the interest on those loans, England swooped right in, purchased a vast number of shares, and effectively gained ownership of the canal. Boom! Egypt became a British protectorate in 1914. Now, contrast that with Sudan. Sudan was strictly about strategic military supremacy. Why? Because the Nile River flows right through Sudan, and the Nile is the absolute lifeline of Egypt. To protect their newly acquired Egyptian financial assets, England simply had to control Sudan. They even ignored local opposition to build a military railway track there. So you have brilliant financial leverage on one hand and raw military strategy on the other. 1909. If you're taking notes for your exams, definitely circle this year. It's a pivotal year for the southern region of Africa. Earlier on, the Cape Colony and Natal were under British control, while the Orange Free State and Transvaal were under Boer control. Those are people of Dutch origin. However, gold mines were discovered in Johannesburg, and as we all know, gold changes everything, attracting interest from all over Europe. To consolidate its power over these incredibly lucrative territories, England decided to just unify its colonies in the southern region. In 1909, this newly consolidated territory was officially named the Union of South Africa.
Wow, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, haven't we? From the calculated Himalayan treaties securing India's borders to the luxurious exile of Burmese kings, all the way to the conference tables of Berlin where an entire continent was divided. You now know exactly how and when these lines were drawn by these imperial powers. So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. How do you think these artificially drawn borders, these financial takeovers, and these strategic military treaties have shaped the modern political landscape and the conflicts we still see in Asia and Africa today? Keep that question in mind as you review your notes. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.